Here in the Paramount Director Series is Leonard Nimoy on directing and Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home.
Captain's log, stardate 8390. We're in the third month of our Vulcan exile, and it was Dr. McCoy with a fine sense of historical irony who decided on a name for our captured Klingon vessel. And like those mutineers of 500 years ago, we too have a hard choice to make.
Can't go that way.
Well, that's the way you would go if you could.
Yeah, right.
So why don't we bring them over this way a little bit?
Yeah.
Go to your left, guys, will you? About 1.5 to 2 feet. Yeah, something like that. Huh? Not bad.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Can you see the look, please? Yeah. Okay, now the question is, if we're tracking here with Bill, Bill, let me see you do the walk and talk, please. Hold it real quiet, Doug, please.
Yeah. All right, quiet for rehearsal, please, guys. Hold it down now.
And action. Thank you all. Okay, well, just a second. Let's experiment with the possibility that if you take the walk and take a good, long, healthy pause on the walk back so that you turn back to us for the crew of the Enterprise. See if it'll work, will you? You think it might? So now, let's go to the top of the scene.
Marker.
Background.
Action.
Dr. McCoy?
Aye, sir.
Scott?
Aye, sir.
Gordon?
Aye, sir.
Chekhov?
Aye, sir.
Sulu?
Aye, sir.
Let the record show that the commander and the crew of the late Starship Enterprise have voted unanimously to return to Earth to face the consequences of their actions in the rescue of their comrade, Captain Spock. Thank you all. Repair stations, please.
And cut. Good for me. Yeah, all right. This is going to be nice. I go back a number of years here at Paramount. First time I worked here was in 1951. I was 20 years old. Shared a dressing room upstairs in this building with a bunch of other actors. The picture was a picture called Rhubarb, starred Jan Sterling and Ray Milland. And it was pretty exciting stuff for a 20-year-old kid from Boston. I think it was my second job here in town. I had a couple of lines. Nervous, working with Ray Milland, who had just won the Academy Award for Last Weekend. And I think I earned a grand total of about $300 or $400. In 1966, Star Trek went on the air as a primetime television series. And for the first time after 15 years of jobbing around as a freelance and bit actor, I had steady work. We did 3 seasons, and during that time, as the Spock character grew and the Star Trek family grew, and I began to learn more about the process, I thought I would like to make a larger contribution, and I asked for the opportunity to direct. But the gentle answer always was, please put on your pointed ears and get out in front of the camera. In Star Trek II, Spock sacrificed himself to save the rest of his shipmates, and at the end of the movie, the character was dead, and I thought it was over. Science fiction being what it is, there are always possibilities. The executives at Paramount called me after Star Trek II opened, asked for a meeting, and said to me, we would like to know if you would like to be involved in any way in the making of Star Trek III. And of course, I understood that they wanted me to act again as Spock. And I thought to myself, if there ever is going to be a chance to stop fooling around here and get serious about this directing career, now's the time. And I said, yes, I would very much like to be involved in the making of Star Trek III. I would like to direct the picture. And much to my surprise, they said, yes. It's a very complicated art form, probably the most complex there is. And the more difficult it gets, the more challenging it gets, the more I come to realize that there's only one way to do it, and that's to surround yourself, as I've been fortunate enough to do, with some extremely talented people. You get the right people, it all comes out just fine. From the time we finished making the Star Trek series in 1968 to the time we made the first Star Trek motion picture, 1979, 11 years had passed, and it took a little time for us to figure out exactly how to do these things. The feeling at first was that television is television, and you can do a certain kind of show and have a certain kind of good time and so forth, but we're going to make movies now. They're going to be big and serious and important, and I think perhaps we took ourselves a bit too seriously. Looking back over the films that we've done now, I think it took us a little time to kind of figure out how to begin to enjoy ourselves. And as each film progressed, I think we learned a little bit more about what we could do in these movies and what the audience would look forward to and enjoy the most in these movies. The first one that I directed, Star Trek III, was sizable in its passion. It was operatic, and I was pleased by that because I really thought about it in terms of being grand in passion, grand in size, smoke and fire, and with a planet disintegrating. Big stuff. In Star Trek IV, we decided it was time to really lighten up and have a good time, kick up our heels, and do a caper. Get down literally with our feet on the ground on the streets of San Francisco, playing scenes where these guys from another world, another time, are literally having a tough time figuring out how to get across the street. Preparing Star Trek IV, it became obvious that we needed control of a large body of water where we could have large special effects sections of whales coming along the surface of the water and diving down into the water and disappearing. And also there was going to be a very large storm sequence when the bird of prey, the Klingon ship, lands in San Francisco Bay. And our special effects people did some research around town because years ago in Hollywood, most of the major studios had what they called a tank, a very large, oversized swimming pool is what it was, which they could do surface work and underwater photography work. And the tanks had either been closed up because they were no longer being used, or the ones that were still available were inadequate to our purposes for one reason or another. So we were kind of stymied for a while, until one day we were walking around out here in what is now a parking lot here at Paramount, and standing in front of this large blue screen, which was used as a background for some exterior scenes, and our special effects people noticed some seams in the ground around here and went back to the original plans for the building of this studio and discovered that the ground that I'm standing on is actually filled in and was a water tank about 15 feet deep years ago, and they used to use it for surface water battles and water scenes and underwater scenes and that sort of thing. And we discovered that we could do an excavation right here on the Paramount lot, and what grew out of that was a show, the kind of which Hollywood hasn't seen in a long time. Once we decided to do a movie about humpback whales, we started looking at a lot of footage of whales to see if we could find what we needed. And we talked to a lot of underwater photographers, researchers, people who do that kind of work, who get in the water with whales, if possible, and get footage of them. We looked at their work, and it became pretty obvious we were going to have to create our own, because you just cannot get the kind of footage we needed with an actual humpback. They're too shy. They won't get that close to the camera, and they usually won't let the camera get that close to them, let alone human contact with the whales in the water. We needed that as well. So we hired some very, very talented special effects people. We laid out a sequence of the designs of the types of shots we needed and put them to work to create the footage. Now, in Star Trek IV, about 95% of the footage of humpback whales that you will see is man-made. There are only a couple of shots that are actually humpback whales. I think the work is brilliant. It is of two kinds. There are a couple of very large pieces of what we call mock-up, large sections that look like pieces of a humpback whale, the head, the tail end of it, and so forth. And then there are two radio-controlled miniatures. They're about 5 feet long, and they are controlled from outside the tank by men standing at a window looking into the tank and controlling these things with their little radio control transmitters. I think the work is amazing, and I think it has been overlooked because most people looking at this movie, including myself now, forget that this footage is not actual humpback whale footage. It is man-made. It looks so real. I think that these people deserve a lot of credit. Preparing the story for Star Trek IV, I spent some time with some great scientific minds around the country, and I had some wonderful times with them. To hear these people talk about their concerns for the future of the planet, what they're interested in, what they're watching for, I began to become aware that there was one common concern amongst them all, and that has to do with the ecological system on this planet, the fact that we are losing thousands of species per year. And I began to see it as a kind of a house of cards, this ecological system on this planet of ours, where if you build a house of cards, you could take a card away and the house might stand up. You might take another card away and the house might continue to stand, and so forth, until you reach the point where you pull what is known as a keystone card. You pull that card and the whole thing begins to collapse. And we might someday reach that point where one of these species becomes a keystone and the ecological system starts to come undone. And this led to the idea of us coming back in time to the 20th century to try to recapture, to try to revitalize a species that had been lost in the 23rd century and was causing a problem. When we struck upon the idea of the whales being endangered and the size of them, the magic of them, and the mystery of their song, the whale's song, which we know about but don't really quite understand, it seemed like we had found a wonderful vehicle for telling this story in Star Trek IV. When you watch a movie on your television screen, you're not necessarily seeing it the way it was originally intended. If, for example, it was shot for the widescreen, that film has to be readjusted in some way to fit the specific shape of the video tube that you're looking at. As a director, when I set up a shot, let's say there are two people in the scene, and one is at one side of the room and one is at the other. With the widescreen, I can hold both, and one is at each end of the frame. When that shot is condensed to fit on your TV tube, chances are the camera cannot hold both of those actors at the same time. So a choice is made usually to be on the one who's talking and then move across the room with the camera to get to the other one when that person is talking, and not being able to hold both, you can't see the reaction from side to side. Now that may not be the choice that I made when I set up the shot, because I want you as the audience to see the person talking and the person who's listening as well. When the picture is changed to fit the small tube, you can't hold both, and the intent of the scene is sometimes changed as a result.
My friends, we've come home.
So it's been a long trip, and I never thought I'd find myself directing a $26 million feature here on the Paramount lot, but there you are. It's called The Voyage Home. It's a homecoming for me. Here it is for you.
Let's see what she's got.
The directing thing is finally the most extraordinary opportunity that I've been given in my lifetime.
Leonard Nimoy is part of the Paramount Director Series.